Thank you for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com. With us today, a guest that I have had many people ask to have him on. He is one of the favorites here, and today we do have on Dr. Paul Craig Roberts. Dr. Roberts, thank you very much for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
It's always a pleasure to speak with you, Greg.
Yeah, let me just extend your credentials and your background, which is deep, and I'm just going to skim the surface. You are, of course, a former Treasury Secretary, Treasury Secretary, head of economic policy in the Reagan administration. You have an earned Ph.D. in economics, and you are the insider's insider. And as we've talked about in the past, I'm sure the powers that be hate it when you are on basically revealing this is what's going on really behind the curtain. But let's get up. Here's why people are upset. They're upset about two things. They're upset about another war in Syria, and they're upset about the effects on the economy. Let's start with the big dog and pony show that is now making its way through the House and of Representatives and the Senate. And President Obama calling in Republican leaders, McCain and Lindsey Graham, John McCain, Lindsey Graham. And, those are big war hawks. And, John McCain says, well, this would be a catastrophe if we don't go to war now after threatening to do so. They both McCain and Graham, just to set up to you, want a much bigger war. On the other side, you have a lot of liberal Democrats and Republicans, Tea Party saying, whoa. We're funding al-Qaeda. We are, what is the national interest? We don't want to do it. Tell us what's going on here behind the scenes in Washington with that superficial setup.
Well, first of all, let's cut to the chase, and it's got nothing to do with Syria. The reason for looking for a fabricated excuse to attack Assad is to continue the radicalization of Muslims in the hopes that this strife spreads into the Muslim populations of Russia and China. And of course, both countries are bordered by Muslim countries. So the more radicalized the Muslim peoples become, the more trouble it means for Russia and China. And so it is a way that Washington can destabilize Russia and China and get them out of its way in its pursuit of world hegemony. Washington can't very well invade Russia or China, and it doesn't want to risk nuclear war, but if it can destabilize them internally through their Muslim populations, it's already begun in Russia with the Chechens, who are supported by the United States, or rather by Washington, which is different. And then Washington can use all of the non-governmental organizations that it supports in Russia to criticize the Russian government's harsh treatment of the Muslims who are just fighting for freedom and democracy and so on and so on. And so that's what it's really all about. It's how Washington intends to weaken the two giants that they can't run over. So now that the rest of the world has, including our main puppets, the British Prime Minister, the NATO countries, with perhaps the exception only of France, but now the whole world sees that we are again, or Washington is again, fabricating lies as a justification for war. No one will participate.
Well,
so
James Clapper, he's going to be one of the people presenting evidence. This is a guy that committed perjury, allegedly, in front of Congress. I mean, many people say he's a big fat liar. And he lied to Congress about,
that's
that
already
we were
been,
having
that's
a
already
spy
been
program.
proven.
And when he said, we don't have, when in fact we did, it was the opposite of what he said. What do you call that? A lie, I guess. And he's the guy going to be delivering the intelligence that takes us to a war. What about they're calling this a limited action. Couldn't this touch off World War III? On the pre-interview, when I called you to set you up, you said, well, the next few weeks are going to determine the course of the world.
Well, it is, but and it does all lead to nuclear war, because if they succeed in getting rid of Syria, Iran will be the next. And of course, when it comes to Iran, the Russians and the Chinese will draw a firmer line in the sand. And in fact, both countries are already modernizing and improving their strategic nuclear forces. So they expect to be pushed, and they expect to be prepared so that they don't have to give in. But I think what's going on is actually even more scary, because the Congress now is being told by Washington that we have to show a common front. You've got to support the president. How can you not support the president? Our prestige, our credibility, blah, blah, blah. And what the Congress needs to consider is, if Congress supports the president and the rest of the world still doesn't, what has happened to Congress's credibility? It's got no more credibility than the Obama regime. If the rest of the world says, well, we still don't believe you, and we're not going along with this, then it leaves the United States isolated. Now, what if Washington is able to purchase the cooperation of enough of the NATO countries? Well, I mean, we know for a fact that David Cameron will do everything in his power to prostitute the British government for Obama. We know that. And so if handing out bagfuls of money, is required, that will happen. We have to wonder, what has the so-called socialist Hollande in France being promised, that he is so willing to demonstrate his power to make France Obama's whore? Something is going on. Now, what if these governments end up, in the end, supporting the strike on Syria, which is against the opposition of every one of their populations? Then what happens? All the Western governments are discredited in the eyes of their own people.
The polls in the U.S. range anywhere from, more than 60% no to as much as 90% no here in America, and even a higher amount of Americans in a most recent poll says, no, don't arm the Syrian rebels, which is Al-Qaeda. And nobody can answer, what happens if Al-Qaeda gets control? What happens to those chemical weapons if you do topple Assad? Who's going to be in control? It is Al-Qaeda rebels. I mean, top commanders had their picture taken with John McCain, who said, I didn't know that. So the highest person since Kerry has been in the country, John McCain, and he's getting his picture taken with top Al-Qaeda commanders, top Al-Qaeda operatives, and he doesn't know that? I mean, this is outrageous. What comes after that? And what comes after one of these?
Well, I've just told you. Well, look, the most important thing that comes out of it is that you've got every so-called Western democracy, and not a single government has the confidence of the people. So you have the complete discrediting of the entirety of Western democracy, not just in the rest of the world, but in their own countries. So when governments act on the basis of transparent lies, then everyone loses confidence in them. So the real question I'm asking is, what happens in the United States when everybody says, we can't believe a word this government says? It lies through its teeth. Every time it opens its mouth, 1,000 lies jump out. Wars after wars based on nothing but lies. The British say the same thing. The French, the Germans, they all say this. What is the consequence for Western democracy? It just simply disappears. No one has any confidence in any government. So that is far more serious than the fact that McCain is so stupid that he doesn't know when he's meeting with terrorists. Now, the other question, Greg, is suppose we succeed in turning Syria over to al-Nusra, the terrorist front. How do we get Syria away from them?
then they do have possession
What?
as a government of chemical weapons.
It doesn't matter what weapons they have, chemical or not. But how do you get the country away from them? We weren't able to get Iraq away from the Iraqis.
Yeah.
How are we going to get Syria away from al-Nusra? Who has Libya? Not us. Nobody knows.
Well, what about they're talking about limited strikes and, this is going to be limited, no boots on the ground. In other words, they're making out, and they are living in a city called denial. They're making out like, there's no way this could touch off World War III.
Well, look, the reason Obama was saying that was when he saw that there was very weak support, and people wouldn't support it. So he was trying to minimize it. But now they're already talking about, well, we have to do more than a limited strike. You see that the neoconservatives and the hawks like McCain and Lindsey have jumped all over Obama. What do you mean a limited? Why are you giving up regime change? What are you talking about limited for? I mean, what good does that do? We have to go further. We have to overthrow the regime. So Obama now is already, again, talking about doing more. So the real question is whether the Congress will have the wits to realize that if it backs a strike on the basis of transparent lies, I mean, everybody knows that there's no evidence. If they back this strike on the basis of transparent lies, then what happens to Congress's credibility? Especially if the rest of the world still doesn't go along with the strike. So this is the dilemma. This is what they should be worrying about. They shouldn't be worrying about, how do we save face? How does America save face? This is not the issue. The issue is, will any aspect of the government have any credibility if they back Obama when the rest of the world already knows he's lying through his teeth? If they had any evidence, they would have given it to the British Prime Minister so that he could have carried the vote in Parliament. They don't have any evidence. And even the United States intelligence services have said, look, this is not conclusive evidence. This is just evidence that has a high probability of being correct, but it is not confirmed. This is the official position in the report that they released. So they've even had to, all they could get out of the intelligence service was this conditional thing. It's a high probability that Assad used weapons, but we can't confirm it. It's unconfirmed intelligence. This is in the report that the administration released. So how are they going to use unconfirmed intelligence that has a high probability to start a war when no one knows the consequences of the war? Now look at it also this way. Under the Nuremberg Standard that we established in order to prosecute the Nazi Germans and government generals and German officials after World War II, it is unequivocal that naked aggression against a country is a war crime. It does not say it's okay to commit aggression if they're using chemical weapons. It doesn't say it's still a war crime whether they've used for the United States to attack them, whether or not they use chemical weapons. And moreover, if Assad used chemical weapons, he most certainly did not use them against his own people. The al-Nusra Front are not Syrians. They're outsiders that we recruited and sent in to overthrow him. They're not his people. The fact of the matter is, Assad has a higher standing in the polls among Syrians than Obama has with Americans, or Cameron with the British, or Hollande with the French. So all of this garbage talk about he's a dictator and we have to overthrow him, and he's using chemical weapons against its own people. This is just balderdash. How can anybody be so stupid or gullible to believe any of that? It's not his people, even if he used the weapons.
And there's a big question whether or not he did, or the rebels did it themselves.
They're not Syrians. They're outsiders sent into the country. It's still a war crime if we attack him, no matter what he did, unless he has attacked us. Under the Nuremberg standard, you cannot commit military aggression. It's a war crime.
Okay, let's say Congress caves. I hope they don't, but they're what they call flooding the zone. Nancy Pelosi's all, yay, I can't believe in liberal Northern California, everybody's on board with that. Biden wants war, Obama wants war, McCain, Graham, I don't think Rand Paul, he's speaking against it, says it's a bad idea. And many other people, liberal Democrats and conservatives and Tea Party people, Republicans, a lot of people don't like it. But let's say they have their way and they get it through the House of Representatives and we attack. Isn't this starting World War III?
Well, it's another step. And it's an important step because it makes it completely clear to the Russians and Chinese that the United States government lies through its teeth, sets up countries for invasion based on lies, entirely nothing but lies, and they know that sooner or later it has to come to them. So they'll give up any sort of hope they may have that everything can be worked out, that reason will prevail, and they'll see, okay, we're faced with a new Hitler. We've got to be prepared. And it will lead to war, yes. There's no doubt about it.
You think it will lead to World War III?
I think it will lead to World War III. And that, of course, will be nuclear. The Russians and the Chinese are well armed, and they will be even better armed. So that's where it's headed. And
let's say
it's madness. It's madness, and there's nothing to be gained. And the claim that Obama has made that we can't let him get away with using chemical weapons against his own people. I mean, it's not only a lie, but why can't we? What business is it of ours? Why? Syria? He's faced with an invasion. Syria is faced with an invasion from terrorists. What business is of ours? If we were going to get involved at all, we should be on his side. We should be on Assad's side, putting down the terrorists. This terrorist threat is the reason the United States has been at war for 12 years. So why are we now lining up with the terrorists? All those people who got killed and maimed and legs blown off and post-traumatic stress and all this was to fight terrorists. So now we're aligning with terrorists. What for? I mean, why do people even let these absurd discussions go on? I mean, the Congress ought to tell Obama, what is it? You should go to a psychiatrist. There's something wrong with you. Or what they really should be voting on? They should be voting on his impeachment. That's what they should be voting on. He's lied. He's trying to take the world to a dangerous war based on lies. He has an undeclared agenda. He's never said why it is that Washington wants to attack Assad. They pretend that, chemical weapons. Well, the United States uses them all the time. We use white phosphorus. We use depleted uranium. Everybody in Iraq is still suffering from the white phosphorus and depleted uranium that the United States dumped on them for 8 years. So if we're so upset about weapons of mass destruction, why do we have such extensive stockpiles of them? Why does Washington have contingency plans to use nuclear bunker busters on Iran's underground nuclear energy facilities? The hypocrisy is just overwhelming. And so anybody can take any aspect of this debate seriously It blows the mind. It's absurd. It's an absurd debate. The whole thing is absurd, and the risks are extreme. And as you said earlier, there are also economic risks.
And that's what I want to get to. And that this isn't 1994 where we're having all these IPOs and, you know, morning in America, actually afternoon in America. The country's doing great. You know, people are working. We got a 5% unemployment rate. You know, we got everybody going. You know, we have innovation. We have productivity. No, this is the opposite. This is the 29.5-hour work week. This is a 17 and growing $1 trillion deficit. This is, you know, a huge. We're not creating jobs. People are falling off of workloads, work roles. You know, we are a nation of people getting food stamps at a record high, and people getting on to disability because they can't find work. What happens to the economy if Obama and his friends, both Democrat and Republican, get their way and we drop 300 cruise missiles on Syria? What happens to the economy? And I want to talk about all the other things that could happen, but this is not going to be a limited act. They're not going to think it's limited. They're going to think it's war. What happens to the economy if this happens with the derivatives? You know, I think American banks have more than 200 trillion, just to 5 or 6 American banks have more than 200 trillion in interest rates derivatives. What happens to the economy, the global economy, if we do have the first domino of the World War III getting kicked over?
Two things. One, if the conflagration actually spreads, as many predict, including the chairman of the United States Joint Chiefs of Staff, Dempsey. I don't know. Have they got Dempsey on board with this yet? You know, he's spoken against it.
Yeah,
I don't know whether he's changed his mind or not. But regardless, so if something happens to oil supplies, and you've got the Americans living on the minimum wage and they can't fill up the gas tank. And Congress, you have to understand, when they get back in session after September 9th, the two problems before them are the deficit, which has not been resolved, and the debt ceiling limit, which has not been resolved. And recently, the Secretary of the Treasury said he's run out of tricks to keep financing the government in view of the debt ceiling limit. So they can't even finance the government. They haven't dealt with the debt ceiling limit, and so they're going to go to war. I mean.
But could the banks implode? Could we have bail-ins? Could the banks implode? Could the check stop for veterans and Social Security?
The banks can't implode as long as the Federal Reserve will print the money to keep them afloat.
That's comforting.
But when the world sees the United States in a war again, maybe one bigger than we expect, and printing even more money, and still unable to deal with the debt ceiling and the deficit, they may finally lose confidence in the dollar. And if they start abandoning the dollar, then the collapsing exchange rate will bring down the whole house of cards in the United States. The Fed will lose control, the banks will fail, prices will rise dramatically, people will essentially not be able to pay their bills. They won't be able to buy food or fuel or pay their mortgage. It'll just be an unbelievable mess. Now, that could happen. I don't know that it will. I don't know how far idiots go once they get going. I think right now there's just a lot of frustration that this time the big lie didn't work like it worked in Iraq. And the rest of the world say, well, we don't believe you. And they can't pull it off, and they're frustrated. And so they feel like, well, we've got to save face and pull it off ourselves, and we have to go it alone. And maybe if we can get the Congress to go along, we can then get the rest of them to go along. I don't know that they'll succeed, but as I said, if they do, it's going to discredit all Western governments. They will be discredited in the eyes of their own people because nobody believes this lie, including the governments that might end up going along with it. They'll go along with it because of money.
What's your prognosis for gold and silver in this environment?
Well, the gold and silver market is rigged just like the bond market and the stock market. It can't go anywhere as long as the Federal Reserve is prepared to sell naked shorts. As long as they can short gold and silver in the COMEX market, they can dump huge amounts of paper contracts that drive the price down. They can keep it capped. They can't keep it capped if the dollar goes in the terms of other countries saying, we have lost confidence. We don't want these dollars. We're getting out of them. If they do that, then the Fed no longer can rig any market. And if that happens, the gold and silver price is unpredictable. It could be anything. It could go
to the upside. Oh
yeah, I mean, it could skyrocket beyond anybody's expectations.
10,000 an ounce, 7,000 an ounce for gold.
Who knows? I mean, you get a real collapse of the dollar. It could be 30,000 an ounce or more. I mean, who knows? There's a huge supply of dollars in the world. The dollars have been pumped out into the world ever since Bretton Woods, when the United States took the reserve currency role away from Great Britain after World War II. World War II exhausted the British. They couldn't hold on to the reserve currency role, and the pound was displaced by the dollar. Well, ever since, the United States has been pumping dollars out. They're everywhere. The world is drowning in them. And so there's such a huge supply. If the world lost confidence and said, well, let's get out of them, there's nothing to buy them up with.
Last question. Let's say by a stroke of, I don't know, divine intervention from God, the House says, no way. Democrats line up, no. Republicans line up, no. Tea Party Republicans, no way. And they get a pretty resounding no vote. In the Senate, Rand Paul says it'll probably make it through. Democrats have the advantage there. But let's say in the House, not only Republicans and Tea Party folks vote no, but liberal Democrats, anti-war Democrats say, well, I can't vote for this. There's no way. And he gets defeated in the Congress. You think that's game, set, match over, or he goes ahead anyway?
If he goes ahead anyway, he'll be impeached. If he goes ahead in defiance of Congress, you have to keep in mind it's the Congress's authority to go to war, not the president's.
That's right. They have a 90-day clause that he can, but this ain't going to be 90 days.
No. But only if the United States is somehow attacked or in danger.
I got it.
But Syria is zilch, zero.
Yeah, they're not attacking the U.S. or any of our bases or anything else.
That's right. That's not.
Okay.
So if he goes ahead without the support of Congress, I imagine that they will say, well, look, unless we are just to fold up and cease to exist as one of the three branches of government, we've no alternative but to impeach this guy who is defying our constitutional power and breaching the separation of powers. And so I think they would have to impeach him, or else they would just have to say, okay, henceforth in American history, Congress is irrelevant. And we can stay here and collect bribes from the private interest groups, but we don't any longer participate in the government. So I don't think, in fact, I think actually if the vote is very close, it's very hard for him to go ahead.
Okay.
If they win just because the Democrats can outvote the Republicans in the Senate by 3 or 4 people, it's not enough to take a country to war. He's got to have a sizable backing, and the people who oppose it will have to be in a minority. It can't be 52 to 48 or anything like that.
Or
war is
split by 10
too serious.
votes in like the NSA, 12 votes for cutting off funding. Can't be like that. It's got to be resounding.
It's got to be enough that shows that he has enough margin to survive the challenges. Plus, nobody knows what's going to happen.
This could turn into World War III, as you said.
It definitely will, but I don't think immediately. I think it just is another step in that route. The next one will be Iran. And of course,
I don't think they're going to get there. I think this is the line. I think Syria's it. I really do think Syria's the whole enchilada. I don't think they're going to let it fall. That's my
I don't think
personal opinion,
I don't
just
think
watching
I don't
what's going
think
on
no
with
I don't think Russia and China will fight to save Syria. I don't.
I hope you're right.
I don't think I mean they'll fight not militarily. They've been doing it with their expressed opposition.
You said
And
one
the
day
warnings, and what the warnings convey is, look, we're losing confidence in you. We don't trust you. Don't think we are going to fall for this. And so if two powerful countries, they're both powerful countries, tell you that, and you go ahead, then you're telling them, we don't care what you think. That's not a good thing to do. That's the way you get to major wars.
To your point, and you brought this up, I'll close with what you said, I don't know, a couple of interviews ago. If China sells their $1 trillion U.S. Treasury bond portfolio, there's no more America.
That's it. That's it. There's nothing, Washington has nothing with which to buy up those dollars.
All right. And with that, we'll close. Dr. Paul Craig Roberts, thank you so much for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com. This interview is going to make a lot of people very happy. Thank you so much, sir.
Well, I hope so.